he worked before with Interpol as an operations coordinator and research assistant and currently works as a research assistant for Transnational Organized Crime. He holds a master's degree in conflict, peace, and security. He also has a postgraduate in crisis management and armed conflict from UNITAR. He also holds a master's of humanities from Lomé, Togo, and his field of intervention includes conflict and peace and security and sustainable development, and is based in West Africa. You're all very welcome. And today, let me see, Dr. Uche, this goes to you. According to you, what is transnational organized crime?
Thank you, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. And just to go directly to your question, the transnational organized crime, the name is evident, is a crime that occurs and operates within nations, two or more countries, and is a major threat to global security. It can be as a result of criminal cartels. It can be as a result of people, interested in moving drugs. It can be drug trafficking, environmental crimes, human trafficking, and many others. So that is the nature of transnational crimes. They are crimes, but they are crimes across nations, and that is their uniqueness.
Okay.
I would wish to, that's a very straightforward definition. To complicate it just a little, let me bring in the legal definition, which captures what has been said. Now, the legal definition of transnational crimes is to be found in the United Nations Convention against Organized Crime. In short, it's called the UNTOC, or another name for it is the Palermo Convention, because it was concluded in Palermo, Italy. Interestingly, a country where there was the mafia. That particular state had a lot of mafia activity. So according to Article 3, Sub-Article 2 of this convention, they broaden the definition of transnational so that it can capture more than just one aspect. So according to this convention, an offense is transnational if it satisfies one of a number of alternative conditions. So long as whatever offense is undertaken satisfies one of these four criteria, then it is considered transnational. So one, if the offense is committed in more than one state, that makes it transnational. Or it is the offense is committed in one state, but a substantial part of its preparation, planning, direction, or control takes place in another state. So say a person committing a cyber crime, you are planning it from Kenya, but you're going to execute it in, say, Tanzania. The fact that the majority of the preparation, the planning, or the control happens in Kenya and the actual offense takes place in Tanzania, that makes it transnational. Or the third way of looking at transnational is that an offense is committed in one state, but involves an organized criminal group that engages in criminal activities in more than one state. So when you have an organized criminal group that undertakes offenses in many states, that qualifies to make the offenses they commit as transnational. Lastly, is if an offense is committed in one state, but has substantial effects in another state. So you could, for example, imagine that you commit an environmental crime in Kenya, but the effect of that environmental crime are felt more, say, in Uganda. Then that aspect of transnationality comes in because substantial effects of that offense committed in Kenya are felt in another state. So that is what makes, that is the legal definition according to the Palermo Convention of what qualifies an offense as transnational. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. That was so broad and insightful. Mr. Akizi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam, and thank you to my predecessors that have already set it forward. I think they are quite right. But let me say something. I was born and raised in a small village at the border, a small village that was poor, and the power of the state was very little. I worked also after as a police officer, so I was involved in many investigations in terms of organized crime. And now I'm working as a coordinator of programs in development, including security sector reforms and all those things. So my perspective, my intervention here is the experience I'm going to share is a field experience as someone who lived in a village, who saw what is organized crime, what is transnational organized crime, someone who investigated the organized crime, and someone who is working to defend the perpetration of organized crime. When we are talking of transnational organized crime, we first have what we call organized crime, and the organized crime is perpetrated by two or more people in a concerted or associated way. We can give an example like Doctor said it, like human trafficking, like drug trafficking, like human smuggling, and so on and so forth. And this becomes transnational when it is from one country to another. When it associates more than one country, then it makes it transnational. I think for people who don't know what is really transnational organized crime, explaining it simply like this can allow them to understand. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. The next question, Dr. Constance. What is the threat of organized crime?
Yeah, maybe let me go forward and the colleagues will come in. Okay. For me, the main threat of organized crime or transnational organized crime is human security. It's a threat. The organized crime is a threat against human security. What do I understand by human security? First, when we take, for example, counterfeiting and drug trafficking, counterfeiting is very often taken into countries illicitly or without paying taxes and all those things. It means that there is what we call tax evasion by the state, and it makes that the states become fragile. People who are involved in organized crime, they are building networks, and these networks are against human beings and also the states. So it makes human beings fragile, and it also makes the state fragile, and the whole of the world, it makes it fragile. And we have many examples of states that have become fragile, mentioning the RDC Congo that you mentioned earlier, mentioning Guinea-Bissau, mentioning Mali, mentioning and other countries that you already know. So I will leave the floor to my colleagues to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I concur with what my predecessor has said. That is very much true. And actually that leads even to states collapsing, right? It also now, transnational organized crimes also have economic impact. They can be detrimental to the economies of different countries because of the illicit activities that are undertaken, such as drug trafficking, the smuggling, which therefore means issues of intellectual property theft, undermining legitimate industries, distorting markets, draining financial resources from the formal economy. All these will have disastrous effects such as economic losses, reduced investments, diminished tax revenues for the government. Then you will also have the social consequences, which means, for example, the vulnerable populations are likely to be exploited for purposes of forced labor, sexual exploitation, or other human rights abuses. Right? They can even contribute to social disintegration of communities. Because if say you have a society where people end up becoming drug addicts, then that particular, the social network of that community is being broken down. Corruption, that we cannot underestimate the effect, knowing full well even the effects of corruption. And from having effects at the national level, these effects can spread out and have a global reach. Because, for example, through the weak or porous borders, and if there's also maybe a problem of weak law enforcement, then clearly we are just, it's very easy for these problems or these bad effects to spread out to other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Ushe, do you have something to
Yes.
say?
Yes, maybe I should come in here. The very important part of this, I mean, I agree with what my previous colleagues have said, but I also think that without preempting the conversation, I think that transnational organized crimes are, the oxygen of conflict, because these criminal networks fuel terrorism. It is through these networks that, like my colleague said earlier, illicit financial flows happen. I can give an interesting example. In Nigeria, where I come from, there was a time in the Niger Delta region where there was oil bunkering. Oil bunkering is illegal oil theft, that is, crude is taken illegally from Nigeria and transported across the shores of Nigeria internationally. Research has proven that the same route through which these illicit oil are transported, weapons are also transported back into the country to destabilize the country. So it has very direct implications on conflict. And I can also give other examples, the Northeast, the Boko Haram situation. Through these networks, terrorists also get funds. And as you know, funding is the oxygen of terrorism and conflict. So the wide-ranging impact of transnational organized crimes really have implication, yes, on the capacity of the states, and I agree with my colleague talking about fragile states, and also the increasing problem of what they call ungoverned spaces. This is where allegedly these criminals incubate, and from there they operate and cause havoc in several parts of the continent and indeed the world.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you all. Could there be a link between transnational organized crime and conflict? Dr. Constance?
I said earlier, the link is all over the places. The channels through which the illegal fish in Baga in northeast Nigeria, the channels through which the illegal fishing, illegal transportation of fish across West Africa happens, is said to be the same channel through which terrorists in the northeast Nigeria, especially but not exclusively Boko Haram get their funding and weapons to continue to cause the havoc they're causing. So there is a direct link between transnational organized crime and conflict, not only in Nigeria, in other parts of the world, also in Zamfara State, where there are large deposits of gold in Nigeria. It is alleged that there are a lot of transnational criminals who come illicitly into Nigeria in search of gold, and the bandits that are operating in Zamfara State in Nigeria seem to be getting their weapons directly through the same routes that this gold find their way out of the country. So it is very, very linked. And really, it is also linked, if you permit me, to natural resources, be there oil, illegal oil, bunkering, be there gold, illicit gold mining, and be there diamond really. The issue of blood diamond in Sierra Leone. And indeed, recently we are looking at issues of transition minerals, and I'm glad that our friends who have worked in DRC and Congo may be in the room. So, several pockets of conflict all over the continent and all over the world, directly and indirectly, are linked, with the operation of these transnational criminals that are often linked to illicit theft of natural resources.
Just to add on to that, add on to my colleagues' explanation, there is also the issue of the exploitation of weak governance, because the conflicts result in weak governance structures where there's breakdown of law and order, displacement of populations. Then the TOCs, the transnational organized criminal groups, will exploit these vulnerabilities and help to establish themselves in conflict-affected regions. And that taps into what has been said. You find that they're the ones now controlling resource exploitation in these areas. So that is a link. The other aspect would be that they undermine, the link is the undermining of peace building efforts in where there are post-conflict situations. So since these criminal groups were able to entrench themselves, then they will constantly work towards hampering any peace-building efforts, because it means if peace-building efforts are fruitful, then they will be, for example, be unable to continue with the exploitation of the resources that are available. So in that way, indeed, the transnational crimes are linked to conflict.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I do agree with the previous colleagues in this issue. For me, there are some organized crime which are more involved in conflict or more linked to conflict than others. When we take drug trafficking and arms trafficking, they are more linked to conflict than others. But generally speaking, organized crime is a favorable ground for conflict, and also violent conflicts are also a favorable ground for organized crime. When we take arms trafficking and drug trafficking, for example, they are one of the reasons of the instability in Guinea-Bissau, for example, and in other countries in West Africa. When we take also these countries, we can also see that these countries are fragile countries. So it is because the countries are fragile that the arms trafficking and drug trafficking is very easy for criminal networks. And when we take the case, for example, of Mali, it is Mali and other countries, it is also because of weak governance that the organized crime is very easy in terms of minerals, in terms of gold, in terms of arms trafficking, in terms of human trafficking and others. So it is both organized crimes and of course conflicts are favorable ground for one another. When you have weak governance, when you have conflicts in an area, it is a favorable ground for organized crime to be developed, because there is no more control, there is no more the power of the state, and it gives way to organized crime to be developed or to prosper. And when you have also organized crimes, it means that the country is fragile, and also it gives favorable ground to people, for example, armed traffickers, for conflict. So they are favorable ground for one another, and the solution for all these things is, for me, good governance, a strong state. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. This could go to any random person in the congregation, if I can use that. Could anyone give us an example or any case where transnational crime has facilitated conflict or vice versa? Anyone? Jacob?
Yeah, let me give you just a small example. Okay. Recently in Guinea-Bissau, there was a coup d'etat that failed, and after investigation, the finding of the investigation was that the coup d'etat was led by drug traffickers and armed traffickers in the region, because Guinea-Bissau had a free democratic election with a president-elect. He was trying to stop all these networks, and they did not agree with the position of the government, and they tried to throw down the president in power. Fortunately, it failed. So this is one example that where you have transnational organized crime that is leading to conflict. When we take also the case in Mali, it's because for years there were some areas, ungoverned areas in the desert, where organized crime was prospering, and when it came after the conflict in Libya, it was very easy for them to transform themselves from going from organized crime to jihadist. So these are some cases that can show that organized crime can lead us to conflict.
Yes, to add on to the examples, you definitely have the case that is known to all, the natural resource plunder and conflict that has happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, they have experienced protracted conflict, which has been fueled by the illegal exploitation and trade of their natural resources, such as gold, coltan, tin, and tantalum. Right? So these criminal networks and armed groups exploit these resources. They use the proceeds to finance their activities, including to procure more weapons, so that the war can propagate and they can continue doing their work. You also have the issue of wildlife trafficking and conflict in Central Africa. Here, the trafficking in wildlife products such as elephant ivory and the rhino horn has contributed to conflict dynamics in the Central African Republic and again, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So again, they continue to exploit the instability, the weak governance as a way of generating these profits, which they, for example, will launder to other places. So these are, then there is the most famous one, which Dr. Uche spoke about before, the blood diamonds and the conflict in Sierra Leone. it's very clear that the illicit diamond trade uh, exacerbated the conflict, it fueled the violence and prolonged the war. Thank you.
Maybe I should jump in at this point to sort of emphasize what I've spoken about earlier. Currently in Nigeria, there is a conflict, described as banditry in Zamfara, in the northern part of Nigeria. Now, Zamfara has large deposits of gold. Coincidentally, the conflict had continued to persist because the illicit transnational criminals are using the situation of conflict as a way to getting access to this gold and taking them out illegally. And also, when there is a conflict, an interesting part of it is that there's a limited, like my colleague talked about earlier, there's very limited government presence in areas of conflict. So there are two lubricants. The conflict lubricates the transnational organized crime. The transnational organized crime provide channels, to bring in weapons and funding that continues to perpetuate the conflict. That's why, for instance, in Nigeria, there is what we call the conflict economy. The beneficiaries of the conflict, the transnational organized criminals, it is in their interest for the conflict to continue so that their trade can flourish. And that was what was also happening in the Niger Delta. Where, of course, the illicit criminals, transnational criminals were taking away oil illegally in hundreds of thousands of barrels every day. And for this illicit transnational oil trade to continue, they needed to make sure that the region is unstable. So these criminals are very smart and they ensure that they continue to find ways of sustaining this conflict so that their trade can continue on the ground. So yeah, these are co-lubricants, as it were, to each other. Wherever this transnational criminality persists, there's always conflict so that there will be limited government presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there's anyone out here who would want to add, to top up on what they said. But this reminds me, there's a time I was watching a documentary about Kony, if you remember, Kony rebels in the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda, the way they moved from Uganda to South Sudan and then ended up in Central African Republic. And then once they get there, all they were doing, I don't know, there's a big forest, is it Garamba or something? And all they did was kill and rhino, is it not rhino? Elephant tusks. And the person there in the documentary, it is said the number of elephants in that national park like dropped from I think over 20,000 to currently around 2,000 or even less. Like that is what they are doing. So that is so evident on what transnational organized crime and conflict looks like. Yeah. So how, according to what has been talked about, how can communities engage to reduce or mitigate the vices, the results of whatever comes out of this act?
Well, maybe I should just get in. I think that there's the need to scale up information sharing across countries. Because these networks operate from one country to the other, information sharing across countries and across jurisdictions is very important. I think it is happening, but it can happen a bit better. The second thing is that there is a need to deepen research. Often, for instance, the issue of ungoverned species have been tackled traditionally with kinetic weaponry, that is to say, bombardment using the army and all of that. As important as this may be, it seems that the results, across the world has not been as expected. So there is a need to sort of conduct sections like the one we're having to begin to deepen research, to open up the power dynamics operating in these areas, because this is a conflict economy. And these economies can be understood and these economies can be obstructed. And whenever these economies are obstructed, both the transnational organized crimes and the conflict will be affected negatively. So I think we need to do more studies. We need to also use non-traditional methods, because it appears that traditional methods have yielded limited results in the past, and we need to continue to share information across countries. Thank you.
I would also wish. Sorry, it's okay. Just go ahead.
Carry on, please.
I wanted to say that I want to bring in a gender perspective by saying that the various initiatives that are begun should also specifically work towards targeting or engaging the youth and empowering women. And the reason for this is because these two are a particularly vulnerable group or groups. And so they can easily be recruited. So if they can be empowered in various ways, education, economic opportunities, making them participate in decision-making processes within the community can greatly help in addressing this issue of transnational organized crime and conflict. But if we keep sidetracking them, that it is the men, well, you're also losing the part that some of the people who suffer the most in cases of conflict are the women. So to be part of the solution is very much important. And that would call even for the strengthening of community-based rehabilitation and reintegration activities. So that post-conflict, how do we reintegrate maybe those who are honestly also involved in the conflict of no will of theirs? They found themselves as part of this conflict. So they need to be rehabilitated and reintegrated back into the community. And the community also needs to understand and appreciate why these people cannot be just thrown out. They remain as part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I do agree with you. We have to continue awareness raising. We have to continue research. We have to continue empowering. But for me, all these things are part of the solution. Just imagine a minute that we can go for awareness raising in an ungoverned area or where the state does not exist practically. These people are vulnerable. These people, there is hunger everywhere. And what they do, whatever you say, if you do not help them, they will not understand, or they will not put into practice what you're saying. If you imagine a poor community, they will welcome the first people that are here, that are there to help them. Then for me, what we need to do is for the state to cover all the areas of the country. The president of the state institution, and to enforce the law, and also let these people or this community make sure that they are part of the country, and the cake of the country or the population is shared with them. Otherwise, we can apply all the solutions, all the policies, it will not work. So my answer is yes, awareness raising, but the state, the government must play its role. as the main institution of the country. They need to empower people. They need to create opportunities for these people or in these areas so that there is no way for people creating conflicts, people for organized crime to be welcomed by the communities. But if there is nothing, if the areas are empty, there is no presence of government, there is no institution, the law is not enforced, whatever we do, whatever awareness we are going to raise, I'm not sure it will be sufficient. So our state must play their roles by covering all the lands, all the areas, and empower everybody so that this phenomenon we can fight effectively against them.
Wow, the definition that the what do I call it? It's whatever solutions, whatever would look at a solution. That's really, really insightful. There's someone who asked a question, but there's a question and answer time. I'll reserve that for later. What forms of transnational organized crime are common in conflict-prone areas?
Yes, if I may. In relation to this, and these have already been captured in the discussions we have been having, the issue of arms trafficking. Then you also have the issue of human trafficking. And in this case, the human trafficking will involve this individual being used for forced labor, sexual exploitation, or the recruitment of child soldiers. Then you have drug trafficking. Conflict zones provide a very good camouflage or routes, transit routes for drug trafficking, right? And in particular, we are talking of cocaine and heroin. So because in these conflict areas, there is weak governance, law enforcement, and security institutions, then it's very easy to create these transit routes for drug trafficking. There is the offense of the natural resource plunder, which has been mentioned. Then you also have the wildlife trafficking. That too becomes, again, as a result of the various factors that come about due to conflict, it makes it very easy for these offenses to flourish. Then definitely you have money laundering coming in because illicit profits are being generated from the various criminal activities. That is including the smuggling, the drug trafficking, etc. We need to launder. The organized criminal groups doing this, they need to clean this money. So they have to engage in the process in the offense of money laundering. Then also we should not ignore the fact that nowadays, cybercrime, it is becoming easier, and connectivity, technology and internet connectivity is happening even in these conflict areas, because you really do not need, for example, a laptop. You may just need a telephone, a modern telephone with you. And with that smartphone, you can be able to engage in cybercrime. Then also the aspect of the smuggling of contraband. So counterfeit products, such as cigarettes and other illegal commodities, clothes, handbags, shoes, etc. Because of the poor governance structures and law enforcement, then the smuggling of contraband becomes prevalent in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I do really agree with what you're saying. In conflict areas, for me, you will see that people need weapons to fight. They need arms to fight. And before you get weapons, you need to do what? To order them, to buy them. So you need money. So to get money, you have to do what? Drug trafficking, cocaine trafficking, and other issues. You need to do that trade so that you get enough money to buy weapons. So when you get enough money, you enter into what? Into weapons or arms trafficking. And when you are able to get all this from your money, it means that you are fighting your enemies in the area. And when fighting, you need what? You need human labor force and recruitment, where we have what? Child soldiers. So it's also part of organized crime. And after that, we have also the exploitation of women, because all those men who are fighting, they need also women for their sexual satisfaction and all those things. We have in these areas, we have no presence of the state. So it means that all the goods that are being trafficked, all the goods that are being, they are being smuggled. No tax on the goods and all those things. So these are some of the common organized crime forms that you will find in conflict-prone areas.
Thank you. And lastly, how does transnational organized crime link with money laundering and illicit financial flows in areas of conflict?
Hello? Yeah, just to make it short, maybe the other colleagues will come and take it over that point. When we talk of transnational organized crime, behind transnational organized crime, we have cash. And that is what makes the main difference between organized crime and terrorism. Otherwise, terrorism is also organized crime. But in terms of in terrorism, we have mainly ideology. But in transnational organized crime, we have the desire to have money, to gain money, and to have power. So when we take cocaine trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, when we take contraband or smuggling, all these trade is all about gaining money and to get power. So there is a direct link between transnational or organized crime and illicit flows. And it is these illicit flows that are also used to fuel organized crime and also conflict, and in some areas terrorism. They also finance terrorism. So I think my colleagues who are here can take over and give also their contribution.
What you have said is very true, because all these activities that are being undertaken by the organized criminal groups result in what we call dirty money, criminal proceeds. These criminal proceeds have to be cleaned. They have to be made to appear to be from some licit or legal activity. And in order to do that, then the money laundering process must be undertaken. So in that case, then that provides a direct link. So the transnational organized crime will facilitate generating the illicit proceeds. Then the process of money laundering will be used in order to conceal this illicit origin, which eventually will have an impact on the various communities or the systems in that particular country. And as we have been having this discussion, we have said that conflicts perpetuates or provides a fertile ground for the continuation of these transnational organized crimes that generate this criminal proceeds. So in that way, the link comes about.
maybe I should say a few things. Um, the sorry, the are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, yes.
okay, I think that I am connected twice, so I'm hearing myself. Anyway, the important thing about this is that transnational crimes um, make available large quantity of monies. So when these run into criminals suddenly run into large quantity of money, they have a dilemma of how to move the money around. Um, Now, because these monies are not legally acquired, they are proceeds of criminality, the only way to move the money is to launder them. And there are several ways they use to launder them. And money laundering is basically having to find ways to legitimize an illegitimate proceed of crime. So there is a direct link because, for instance, when you talk about oil theft in Nigeria, the estimate is that about 400,000 barrels of oil are stolen every day in Nigeria. Imagine when somebody has illicitly sold even 200,000 barrels of oil. That's a lot of cash. So the dilemma will be, how do they legitimize these proceeds? And they use several channels, including tax havens and all kinds of sophisticated international processes. They try to undercut these processes to ensure that these processes of crime find their way into the legitimate economy, as it were. So yes, there is a direct link between transnational organized crime and money laundering. Indeed, um, it is like a channel. Transnational organized crime, money laundering is a channel through which transnational criminals move their illicit proceeds from one part of the world to another so that it can be available for their benefit.
Uh, Thank you. Thank you everyone, for everyone that has participated, for everyone that came in, those that came in late. We have been talking about, we have been discussing, we have been trying to understand the relationship between transnational organized crime and conflict. And on our panel was and still is Dr. Uche Igwe. He is a renowned commentator and contemporary issues of African politics and governance. We had Dr. Constance Gikonyo. She is an advocate and senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Law. And then we had Akizi Egni Makala. Mr. Akizi Egni Makala, the Deputy Regional Coordinator, SICO program in West Africa. And right now, it's a random question from anyone. Does anyone have anything to share? Personal, could have heard from somewhere, in regards to what we have been talking about. Is there anyone?
I think the only thing I can share is that this sort of conversations, this sort of real-time collaboration need to be encouraged and they need to continue. I know that some of these are already going on, but I can't emphasize the fact that it needs to happen from time to time, because it is through this kind of collaboration that information and intelligence is shared to the right quarters so that some of these networks can be disrupted, because it is possible to disrupt them, but you cannot disrupt what you don't understand. So some of these researches, some of these information sharing provide clarity improve understanding, provide contextual contours. Because you see, because this criminality, these criminal efforts are transnational, every nation comes with peculiarities and contexts, and it is difficult to understand all the context while we understand better particular nations that we're connected with. So this information sharing and this dialogue and conversation makes available platforms so that contextual contours can be shared, intelligence can be shared, collaboration can begin to happen so that these networks can be disrupted and eventually eliminated.
I concur with my colleague. Unless we talk about it and share the knowledge we have, and also get to learn the peculiarities of these offenses or what is happening in a particular state or jurisdiction, we will each be fighting or attempting to deal with these issues. And at times you're forced to reinvent the wheel, yet the wheel already exists. It's a matter of understanding, okay, this is the wheel. I need it for this purpose. So how can I adapt it to suit the particular purpose that I want to use it for? So definitely, I have enjoyed the conversation. I have learned more about aspects of the Central African Republic in terms of transnational organized crimes. So definitely, these are conversations that should be encouraged to continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. My point is, if for this such discussion, you can also extend the invitation to political leaders. It will be also nice for them to participate in such discussion, because for me, they are the center of all the action. They are the one who are making the decision. They are the one who are involved in lawmaking and in policy making. So it will be interesting for them to be involved in such discussions, so that they take into account the suggestion, the contribution of each and everyone, so that in their leadership, in their decision making, all our contribution may be taken into account for a more prosperous community. Thank you so much.
While I wait for questions from the audience, I wanted to share like a personal experience. There's a time I was working in Nakuru, Kenya, and there's this a part in the city that's only governed by gangs. Like everyone in the community had to belong to a particular group of gangs. Like it doesn't matter, from kids, children as little as 12 years, like you had to belong to a gang for your own safety. Like that's how bad gangs, transnational crime is. That's just an example of many. Yeah. Is there anyone with a question?
Yeah, and of course, this is the same case in Haiti today. If you do not belong to a gang, you will not last long.
Oh, it's terrible. Anyone with a question? It's time for questions. There's someone who sent me a text. That's a former colleague. She was inquiring about in places where I find like the state like is also involved in transnational organized crime or crime. What is someone supposed to do? For example, like the gangs I talked about in Nakuru, Kenya. Like one of the guys, when I was doing research, was telling me, you know what? If I wake up every day, maybe if it means stealing phones today and what, I have to get a cut for the policeman to let me go. How is someone supposed to go about that, especially when it's for safety purposes? Thank you.
That's a very sad scenario, but at the same time, a very realistic and reality. And that is simply a case of where corruption continues to fuel these organized, transnational organized crimes to continue happening. Because the law enforcers are the ones who are supposed to be working towards enforcing the law. But in this case, by them receiving bribes, they are the ones encouraging the perpetuation of the offenses. So sadly, in some of those situations, it may be very difficult, especially if, say, the corruption is entrenched in the system, to deal with it. And actually, that is one of the greatest problems of addressing transnational organized crime and conflict in Africa. That whole concept of corruption. Then you have weak compliance systems. You have weak governance systems. You have weak law enforcement systems. And I mean here specifically the court process. So because these systems are not working, it encourages the perpetuation of these activities. Yet these are the entities or bodies that should be working towards eliminating the occurrence of these offenses. So in that particular situation, honestly, I cannot say I have a black and white answer of what one should do. Because at the end of the day, you find yourself, you may go to the police station to tell on someone, but probably you're telling the wrong person. This police officer decides, actually, now you're interfering with my business, I'll deal with you. So you attempting to do the right thing becomes a threat upon your life. So unless there is greater political will from the highest levels to address some of these issues like corruption, honestly, we are not headed anywhere. We can implement many laws and ensure we effectively implement these laws, then it will work. For example, and this generally happens in many African states, people will generate illegal funds or funds from shady activities. But do we ever follow them and ask? And most countries have these laws to deal with these issues, but we do not. Actually, eventually, these people gain respect in society as rich and influential people. So we are caught between a rock and a hard place in addressing some of these issues. Thank you.
And for me, that is where I'm coming back to my main point of political leaders and political will. Even if all the institutions are involved in corruption, in all those things, it will not work unless we have a political will and decision being made. Unless we decide someday that, okay, all people are considered equal and the share of the cake of the nation will be shared somehow equally between members of the society. I know it is impossible, but at least we need to share it in a way or other so that each and everyone is satisfied. Otherwise, if we do not do this, if political leaders do not do this, we'll be always in the same scenario. We'll be in the scenario of the Central Africa, the scenario of RDC Congo, the scenario of Mali, the scenario of Burkina Faso, the same scenario in townships in South Africa and all these countries. So we need political leaders need to be advised. They need to take their responsibilities so that our countries will be ruled in a better way. Otherwise, it will be the same scenario and will go from worst to the worst.
Thank you. I see two hands raised. Jacob, let's hear from you. Let's hear what you have to say. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Jacob. And I see Ida's hand up. Ida, please. Ida, are you there? Hello? Ida?
Hi.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, Ida, I see
Hello?
your hand up. Yes, please. I see your hand up.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, yes.
I was saying, I agree with Dr. Gikonyo, and one of the key issues we're having to deal with in TOC in Africa is the fact that we lack a lot of political goodwill. And the reason why we don't have goodwill is because a lot of our leaders are the ones who are actively involved in these activities of that end up involving the need for maybe money laundering, especially if you were to look at a situation like I'm Kenyan. So speaking from a Kenyan perspective, we just came from an election period and we've seen a huge spike in terms of activities concerning money laundering. But in response to the question that you asked, how to deal with a situation where we have the people who are supposed to be dealing with these issues actively involved, I think there's a place for civil societies. There's and it's an issue that we need to evaluate, because when it comes to civil societies, they're better able to deal with issues from the grassroots as opposed to government, which is more national, or if you have some sort of federal government, they're dealing with issues at a higher level. So if we are better able to engage civil societies and deal with issues from an advocacy level, deal with issues from a sensitization level, where there's a lot of communities or even individuals who end up involved in TOC and they don't even know that what they're doing is illegal and to what extent this thing is illegal. So I think there's a big place for civil societies, and I think this is something that needs to be looked into at a keener level. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ida. That's so insightful. Is there anyone else with something to say? Comments or anything? I'll be waiting. Now, in the meantime, I'd like to invite our CEO, Tabitha Agaba, the CEO of our organization, to say something, something small, and then we'll wind up, I think, if there's nothing more from anyone.
I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tabitha Agaba. I'm the project manager of the Initiative Against Illicit Finance. Prima made a brief introduction about what the organization does, and we're very grateful for everyone that made the time. To our panelists, special thank you for making the time to come and share your knowledge and expertise in this field. We hope to keep in touch, and we will have more of these to share more knowledge and to raise more awareness about transnational organized crime and its effect and other crimes that it intertwines with. On behalf of the organization, thank you very much for making the time, and we hope to keep in touch. You can check out our social media platforms. It's at Illicit Finance on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or you can send us an email at againsttheilicitfinance@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Back to you, Prem.
Yes, thank you, Tabitha. For our panelists today, thank you so much for saving time. Dr. Uche Igwe, Dr. Constance Gikonyo, Dr. Akizi. Honestly, I just wish we we have another discussion with you people on it the next time, because this has been so, I don't know what word I can use. So wow. And on the rest of the team, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our meeting. After stimulating a discussion on understanding the relationship between transnational organized crime and conflict, this leaves us with plenty of ideas It actually gives us a bigger picture, information, and something to really reflect upon when you go out there. I just hope and wish to see you all on the next, it could be a Zoom meeting or, yeah, that is it. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.